Hi there, welcome back to the archives. So I'm just going to continue sharing the book on Africville. It's written by Gloria Ann Wesley. Um, so chapter one is talking about coming to Nova Scotia and the early Black settlement in Nova Scotia. And so a lot of here it says Nova Scotia became home to many Black immigrants. Some of them were enslaved. Enslaved immigrants, enslaved Africans, like people have been saying, are not necessarily immigrants, right? They did not choose to come here. They were taken, they were captured, they were sold, and they came here as human cargo, as property. Yes, Ari? And so, starting from 1713 to 1758, around 200 enslaved Africans were living in the French areas of the French quarters and communities of Louisbourg in Cape Breton. It's about 200 enslaved Black Africans were living in Louisbourg, Cape Breton, right? More enslaved Black Africans arrived to the New England planters, and they were farmers who took over the lands that had been farmed by Acadians before their deportation. So the Acadians are the French. They got deported to the United States. So I don't know if you guys know that, but French Acadians got deported to the United States in 1755. In 1767, Nova Scotia's census listed about 104 enslaved Africans, right? After 1783, white loyalists who fled the United States after the Revolution brought with them 1,200 enslaved Black Africans with them to the Maritimes. So the white loyalists who fled the United States are like, Bundas, we're not doing this. After the Revolution, they moved up to Canada. They brought about 1,200 enslaved Africans with them. Okay, and so there were thousands of free Black loyalists, and they arrived in about the 1780s. Okay, so again, not everybody's like a recent immigrant. I came in the 90s. Some of the Ghanaian communities, they started coming earlier, the 60s, the 70s. Um, the Jamaican communities were coming really, really early, but again, you can see the influence from the Maroons, right? They came even earlier in the 1796. But folks have been here since the 1700s, 1800s. And so Black folks, they settled in like Halifax, Granville, Clemens, Annapolis, Royal, Birchtown, Preston, Little Tracadie, is that how you say it? Um, Tetabukto. Ooh, okay. And so obviously it was hard getting a job because of racism. It still is because of racism. Not much has changed in all those hundreds of years. Black loyalists were nominally free, right? Their racial identity was more significant in deciding their place in society. Because of racism, they were still oppressed. But for the most part, they were free, but not many of them enjoyed freedom, right? A lot of us are free now, but like, are we enjoying freedom? So in 1792, about 1,196 free Black loyalists protested their treatment in Nova Scotia, and they chose to leave for Sierra Leone. So later, 600 Trelawney Maroons who had been sent to Nova Scotia also petitioned the government to leave. It goes into refugees. So after the War of 1812 in the United States, a lot of enslaved from Georgia and the Chesapeake Bay, this is like Maryland, Virginia, they gained their freedom by the by escaping behind British lines. So they came to Nova Scotia between 1813 and 1816 on British ships. So we're seeing the different migrations, right? They settled in Preston, in Hammond's Plains, Beachville, 5 Mile Plains, Beaver Bank, Prospect Road, Halifax, Dartmouth, and other parts of the province. So Halifax has like a deep, deep, deep Black Canadian. Like if we're talking about like Black Canadian, from enslaved Africans from the United States, just like there are Black Americans who are from enslaved lineages. Nova Scotia has a deep, deep, deep history of that. Again, so does Ontario, right? I know Chatham, I think, is where I once knew somebody who was from Chatham, and again, the Windsor area in Ontario as well, too. There are other places, but I'm not so familiar, right? This is what I mean. Like, Canadian history is not really a thing that, like, many of us, even Canadians, talk about. We might know more about American history than we do about Black Canadian history, which is actually really sad. But it's all part of the design, right? Because Canadians didn't have slavery. So in order to talk about Black Canadians who were from enslaved lineages, you would have to therefore admit that Canada did have slavery and Canada did have enslaved Black people. That's not really our story, right? Our story is we are the land of the free. We are the ones who everybody came to escape all of that. But even those who escaped it, they still were from that lineage and were here very, very early. The Nova Scotia in the 1800s, how the population slowly started to increase. It talks about the relationship with the indigenous communities, like the Mi'kmaq, for instance, about British influence, settling into Africville. So again, William Brown and William Arnold, two really, really key figures in Nova Scotia. So William Brown and William Arnold, they were the earliest recorded Black settlers in Africville in 1848, like I said in the last video. A lot of the family names that you'll hear out in Nova Scotia, the Black communities, Carvery, Hill, Fletcher is a prominent Black last Black name, Dixon, the Baileys, the Grants, right? So those are the last names that you'll often hear who were early settlers to Nova Scotia. So then it talks about the explosion, the Halifax Explosion. That's another big part of Canadian history, right? So in 1917, that was the time of the Halifax Explosion. And at that time, Africville's population was about 400 people. The community was somewhat protected from the explosion because they were in higher land compared to the south. No, higher land to the south, right? But still, they had damage. They weren't destroyed, but there was some damage. A few people were affected. There was like a ship exploded. There was dynamite or something on it. Affected a whole bunch of people. So it did affect, the Halifax explosion did affect Africville. It didn't destroy it though, right? People were, you could see they have archival pictures. There's people walking away. You could see the damage down there. And so it goes into the Halifax explosion and what it did to Africville. So check that out in this book. It's about the health, right? Environmental racism and the effects that it had on Africville, the issues with the sewage system and the poor water, right? So how the residents petitioned for water supply and a sewage service, and they were refused. Obviously, this is going to affect the quality of life, right? There was air pollution. They were going through it. Right, they were really, really going through it. The hospital would dump their raw garbage, dump their bloody body parts, blankets, just like awful, awful conditions. They were treated as a dump, essentially. So folks would just come and dump stuff there. 1852, the city helped them install a community well. Thank you for the well, right? But they made it work. Listen, they made it work. They built their homes, right? They resisted. It was beautiful. They planted flowers. It was home, right? You make do. There was no sewer or running water. They relied on outhouses and wells, but they made it work. Again, coming from an African community, you make it work, right? You're building that outhouse. Um, you're making it work. It reminds me of right now if you're looking at folks in Gaza, right? They're making it work. You're living amongst rubble, but you're making it work. People are making handmade washing machines. They are just using they're just folks in STEM, right? And so I love this because it goes through so many different just ways of life. Like they just made it work, right? They built their beautiful homes, they cooked, they had meals. Even with all that they were deprived, look at what they still did. This is alchemy. This is alchemy, right? Still like air we rise. You try to hold us down, but we're still going to find a way. We're still going to find a way, and we're still going to find and make it beautiful. So I really love the photography in this because it just shows you the everyday lives, right? Of dignified Black folks. There's church life. It talks about the Seaview African Baptist Church. There's a so church was really really important. Faith and community is really important in keeping folks going through. People are getting married. So despite all the odds, it talks about their school life, right? Petitioned for school, but they were turned down. And still they educated their own. They built an Africville school. It was forced to close down in 1953 after 70 years. And so the community was denied government funding for a school by the School Act of 1811. So until 1883, early Africville residents taught their own children with the help of local residents. There was a one-room schoolhouse that they built, and after petitioning more, the Africville School opened in 1883. And so the province closed it down in 1953 to force desegregation in the education system. And so the children would walk to the integrated Richmond School. And after grade 8, they were bused to an integrated high school. And so it talks about their social life. There was a Young Women's Christian Associations. Rosella Carvery, who was a former resident, is holding her granddaughter over here. A hockey league, all black hockey league. It was a colored league, All Stars of 1931, which is pictured here. So there's the all black hockey league. So this is some of their social life, right? This was a women's group. This is one of the residents holding her granddaughter. It's just the resilience. I just love the resilience of Africville, right? There's a softball club in the winter. They were skating and sledding and hockey. They created the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, which ran from 1894 to 1930. So, still like air we rise, right? Just beautiful, beautiful community. Despite everything that the government withheld from them, they still made it work. They would go berry picking. They learned and taught each other how to box. The girls would play in the garden. And again, they also fought for equality, right? B.A. Husbands, who is shown here, made representation to the city authorities on issues like education, housing, and recreation. This is B.A. Husbands. He was a strong, come through, cheekbones. He was a strong advocate for Africville and the betterment of Black Nova Scotians. There was a home for colored children, which is seen here, right? You would have to boil the well water before drinking because it was contaminated. Yeah, if you haven't heard about Africville, definitely check it out. It goes through some of the different community leaders of Africville. Demolition, like I said, it started in the 1960s. They literally just came and brought the bulldozers in and demolished it. And again, you see that happening in the West Bank right now, right? The Israelis just come in with their bulldozers and just demolish the homes. So it's not new, is what I'm trying to say, right? Colonizers use the same tactics over and over and over again. Taylor's oldest time. So yeah, they demolished it. They really, really demolished it. And so do real accounts of people sharing what it is. And so what happened to the land after Africville? They built over it. They built bridges and dog instead of people tracks. We're gonna build it. We're gonna use the land you're on to create a dog park, an off-leash dog park. The Africville Heritage Trust objected to dogs running free on their former homes. They petitioned in 2014. The city changed the park's designation to require owners to leash their dogs. And Dr. Ruth Johnson, was in her 50s when her home was leveled. To think I lost my birthplace to a park. To think that they, the city government, hated us so much that they destroyed our communities so dogs could run free. And they tell you don't talk about race. Get over it. You demolished my home for a dog park? Your dog had more dignity than I did. And so, like it says, then it goes into where the people went. So they were displaced. A lot of them were relocated for destitute communities. Again, we see this with the relocation, forced relocation of like indigenous folks into reserves and stuff. A lot of folks had to go into social housing. Yeah. So it's so organized. It goes into the organizing. It's just so that is a little bit about Africville. Okay, like I said, in 2010, the city apologized on February 24th. So almost to this day, today's the 25th. So on February 24th, 2010, more than 40 years after the demolition, an official apology was issued on the behalf of the Halifax Regional Municipality. And so then Mayor Peter Kelly apologized. He said, "We realize words cannot undo what has been done, but we are profoundly sorry and apologize to each and every one of you. The repercussions of what happened to Africville linger to this day. They haunt us in the who's haunt who? They don't care. It doesn't haunt them. They haunt us in the forms of lost opportunities for the young people who never were nurtured in the rich traditions, cultures, and heritage of Africville. Our history cannot be rewritten, but thankfully the future is a blank page, and starting today, we hold the pen with which we can write a shared tomorrow." So Mayor Kelly promised $3 million towards reconstruction of the Seaview African United Baptist Church, which is a memorial to Africville right now. He offered 2.5 acres at Seaview Park for the Africville Heritage Trust Board, land that is still owned by the city. And he offered a park maintenance agreement to be established between the Africville Heritage Trust and the city for Seaview Park. And he also promised an establishment of African Nova Scotian Affairs Office within the city. And so the apology, I mean, better late than never. But the best apology is change behavior, right? And I would still argue that a lot of Black Nova Scotians probably still face racism every day. So, like, what is an apology if the culture, if the institutions, if racism is still institutionalized? So there's a stamp. Here's a stamp of Africville. Okay. It gives you videos to watch. I tried to log on to some of the few videos, but I couldn't, it didn't work. So let me know if the videos work. Mine, I tried the first few, I wasn't able to see anything. So I'm gonna Dr. George Elliott Clark. He's a Nova Scotian poet. In 1996, Montreal-born jazz pianist Joe Seeley, who's pictured over here, uh, okay, he created 12 musical pieces called the Africville Suite, and they reflected on places and activities in Africville where his father was born. And so Joe Seeley lived in Halifax when Africville was destroyed. And so this is the cover of his Africville Suite. Again, George Elliott Clark. That's Dr. George Elliott Clark. He's a Nova Scotian poet, playwright, and educator. It goes into some controversy and conflict. Yeah, so future generations. Irvine Carvey's grandchildren, Mila Rose and Carter. Olufemi Matthew Odusanya is an Africville descendant. So lots of history here is what I wanted to say. Lots and lots of history, okay? So this is a little bit about Africville in Nova Scotia, Canada. It is a settlement. It was a black settlement that was destroyed and demolished by the Halifax municipalities, and they fought, they resisted, they built their own community. Despite everything that was withheld from them, they were still a beautiful community. We're still remembered today. Folks are still fighting for justice till this day. Okay, so this is a little bit about Africville. It's from the book Africville, an African Nova Scotian community is demolished and fights back by Gloria Ann Wesley. So that is a little bit about Africville. I wanted to share that because we don't often talk about Black Canadians but we do have Black Canadians who come from descendants of enslaved people, enslaved Black Africans. So there's a whole rich history. So I've been seeing more Americans being like, where are the Black enslaved African descendants? Nova Scotia. You'll find them in Nova Scotia. You'll also find them in Ontario as well too. They're here, right? There are Black folks in Canada who are descendants of enslaved Black Africans, who, just like Americans, have resisted, have fought racism, institutionalized racism, and they're still thriving, right? They're still here. Not all of them are thriving. Folks are still up against the same racism that all of us are under as Black people. But it doesn't mean that they didn't fight back. I've been thinking a lot about, I posted a video yesterday, which is an old one, but basically, like, what does it mean when you're still being pressed down by oppression and you're just like, you know what, we're okay. We're going to make do. Not to say that we don't resist. I cut that part of the video. Right? Not to say you don't resist, not to say you don't fight back. But what does it look like when you make do with the conditions that you have? As a kid, I remember watching, I think it was Matilda. Remember the scene where Bruce defies Mrs. Trunchbull, and as punishment, she makes him eat the big cake, and then she brings another big cake, and he has to eat it, otherwise he's going into the chokey. And that as a kid radicalized me, because that was when I was like, oh, you can enjoy the punishment. You can make do with it. It doesn't have to be like this awful thing. And I think Africville is that, right? That's not to say they didn't fight back. That's not to say they didn't petition. That's not to say they didn't resist. But they also were like, oh, you want us to stay in these conditions. You're not going to help us. All right, well, we're going to build our own schools. We're going to build our own walls. We're going to boil our own water. We're going to garden. We're going to plant. We're going to create life here. We're going to get married. We're going to have children. And I think that, to me, don't forget that that's also part of resistance, right? Not being completely, what is the word? Taken or succumbing to the despair. Finding joy, right? That's why folks say joy is a form of resistance. Oh, you want me to suffer? Watch me enjoy this. Right? That's alchemy. Whatever it is that you give me, watch me turn this into gold. And I think Africville is a true testament of what alchemy looks like, of how Black people alchemize the situations that we're given, right? How we turn it into gold, how we just keep going. And that's what Africville did, right? You're not gonna fix our water, no problem, no problem. We're still gonna ask for it. We're still gonna petition for it, but we're gonna boil it, right? We're gonna keep on going. We're gonna keep on going. And so I'm just gonna end on that note. So happy Black History Month to the Black Canadians. Thank you to those who came before us, who fought for us immigrants to be able to be here, right? Similar with the United States, don't forget that like Black Canadians, like folks in Nova Scotia, really fought and paved the way for a lot of us immigrants to be here. And so thank you to all of those folks, all right? Until next time, in solidarity.